I just want to continue talking to you guys a little bit about worship. What is worship? I know we talked about it a little bit ago in the context of 1 Samuel, but I didn't really feel like I had said everything I wanted to say about it. I mean, it's such a broad topic. I know we talked about last time about the Hebrew word for worship, basically meaning, an act of service. It's what you do. But I've been thinking about what is worship in regards to today. We typically think of worship as, we sing a couple of songs and maybe get a few goosebumps if it was really good and they sang slow enough in the style and the songs that I liked. That's how we think about it in our Western culture, and that's flat out wrong. If you talk about or you read about worshiping in spirit and in truth, which is always also talking about things about the Holy Spirit. What it is now, if you think about the context I was talking about, worship is what you do. It's like the Hebrew word abad. It's temple service. It's something that you're doing for God. Now think about the giving of the Holy Spirit for specific things to do in the Old Testament. It was under Moses, I believe, when people were given the gift of the Holy Spirit. They came on them so that they would do specific things such as architecture, such as building programs and projects. There were very specific empowerments by God. The thing about, back to what I just said about the singing and the dancing. Now that is worship too, but it's not confined to that, and it's not necessarily even the predominant form of it. But if you look, if you read here in 2 Samuel chapter 6, when David brings the Ark of the Covenant in to Israel, is after a war with the Philistines, and where are we? It's chapter 6. Oh, I'm looking at chapter 5. The Ark is brought to Jerusalem in 6 verses 12. David goes on, he gets it, and he went to Obed-Edom into the city, and you see. The king now was told King David, saying, "The Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him," because he left the ark there earlier, and on account of the ark of God. And David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David with gladness. And so it was that when the bearers of the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed an ox and a fatling. And David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, and he was wearing a linen ephod. He wasn't naked, as a lot of people think. That's an angry accusation made by his wife later on out of jealous rage. So David and all the house of Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouting and the sound of the trumpet. And it happened as the ark of the Lord came in the city of David, and Michal, daughter of Saul, looked out the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart, so she's angry. The accusation comes later, but they brought in the ark of the Lord and they set it in its place inside the tent, which David had pitched for it, and David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And when they had finished, yada, 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 basically the whole town was excited. It was bigger than Christmas. David actually gave, if you read further on, he actually gave every single person that was assembled, their family, a gift. Basically bought their whole family supper. But earlier on in there, when they first went out to get the ark and they brought it as far as the house of Obed-Edom, it says that in verse 5, David and all the house of Israel were celebrating with the Lord with all kinds of instruments made of fir wood, with lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, cymbals, and then something else happened later on, and they stopped and they left it. They didn't quite get it all the way in. But basically, it's huge celebration. There was music, there was singing, there was dancing. David was shaking everything God gave him with all of his might. He was so thrilled. Now, that's the type of celebration that they give to the physical representation that they have of the Lord through the Ark of the Covenant. Now, let's jump all the way back into 1 Samuel here. In 1 Samuel, in chapter 4, the Philistines hear the celebration of God. The enemy hears worship, and they're freaking out. In chapter 4, the Philistines heard the noise of the shout. I'm going to start in verse 5. And it happened as the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord came into the camp that all Israel shouted with a great shout, so that the earth resounded. when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, "What does that noise of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews mean?" And they understood that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp. I read in a different version last night, and they said that they understood that God was in that camp. And the Philistines were afraid. Oh, here it is, because they said, "God has come into the camp." And they said, "Woe to us, for nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us, who shall deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods?" These are the gods that smote the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness. They go out because of disobedience on the part of Israel, and they capture the ark. They're freaking out, but they come. Now so here's the question: is your worship in spirit and is it true? Is it in truth? Is it really impacting your life? I had mentioned earlier that excuse me, that this is worship means that the original Hebrew word for worship means it's a part of temple service. It's your actions. It's what you do for God. Does what you do line up with how you say you worship? Are you just singing a song, or is this something that's real for you? I know I mentioned before, and it's one of my. It's a topic I speak on a lot. It's a passage I speak out of a lot. Out of the sins of Eli's sons. Now, this is actually one of the reasons why they captured the Ark of the Covenant, because Phinehas and Hophni, the sons of Eli, had actually caused the worship of God to be insincere. They're taken off. If you remember, it's 1 Samuel chapter 2. They were taking the best parts of the meats, and they caused Israel to despise the sacrifice, which was one of the forms of worship. When your life doesn't line up with what you say you are, with your position, who you say you are before God in public, God brings consequences to that. When you say you're a Christian, when you drive around with your Christian bumper stickers and you're cutting people off in traffic, God doesn't look kindly upon that. It's a poor witness. In 1 Samuel in chapter 15, just like the sons of Phinehas and Hophni, that's when Saul, when he was going out to worship God, he was prevented by the Amalekites. And so God judged the Amalekites and sent Saul in to destroy them. And he said, "Now leave as a form of worship, because the sacrifice, he said, don't take anything. Leave that all." And Saul said, "Okay," went out, destroyed the Amalekites, enjoyed the blessing of God. And then Samuel comes in and says, why is it that I hear this bleating of sheep in my ears? You weren't supposed to take it. And Saul goes, "Oh, yeah, I thought it was okay to take a little bit." And here's the kick. Does the Lord take delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the voice of the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams, for rebellion is a sin of divination. It's not as much about the singing as much as it is about bringing your life alongside what God says, this is how I want you to live. If you look at the Greek form of the word worship, it was confused very often in the early Roman times with human sacrifice. They were comparing the text. It said, let me get you the exact reference here. In Romans 12:1, it says, "I urge you, by brother mercies to God, presenting your bodies as a living and holy sacrifice acceptable to God," which is your spiritual act of worship. A lot of times in the early Roman courts, one of the reasons they hated Christians, one of the accusations they brought against them was they said, "You guys are in favor of human sacrifice." That was one of the things that they used in court to convict Christians and then to execute them, because they said, "You guys are in favor of human sacrifice." Yeah, we're in favor of sacrificing ourselves, but as a living sacrifice. That's what worship is. Worship is bringing yourself in line with God. It's not just about praising and singing songs. That should be part of it, but what that's supposed to do is bring your life into alignment with where God says you should be and how you should act. That's to help align your attitude with God's. So go this week, strive for holiness, and go with God.